Here's the situation, I've decided to buy the luxury car from you, Tiffany. It's something an ordinary person doesn't really need, but my parents have been talking about upgrading their vehicle, and since marrying Peter, I've noticed a shift in him. He's become more self-absorbed, and lately, he's been coveting the expensive car my parents gave me. Honestly, I'm fed up with it. I'm Tiffany, I'm 28, and I met Peter in college. We've been married for 3 years now. Peter's outgoing and well-liked, which is the opposite of me. I'm introverted and have a small circle of friends. We started talking more as we worked through college assignments together, and eventually, we became study partners. I was caught off guard when Peter asked me out, but I was thrilled and said yes immediately. What attracted me to him was his charm, his easygoing nature, and his focus on his studies. On the flip side, I always knew Peter had lots of attractive, fashionable friends, so I was aware it wouldn't have been hard for him to find someone else if he wanted to. One day, I worked up the courage to ask him if he really thought I was the right one for him. He looked surprised and asked why I'd even ask such a thing. I confessed my insecurities and admitted I wasn't sure why he chose me. After a long pause, he finally said, "I'm comfortable with you." His answer left me unsatisfied, but before I could say anything more, he got distracted by his phone. I didn't want to make a scene, so I dropped the subject, agreeing with him and apologizing for bringing it up, but the doubts stayed with me. Over time, things between us seemed to flow smoothly. We finished college, got married, and moved into a condo. I found a job at a regular company while Peter continued his grad studies and research. When I told my mom about our engagement, she was thrilled but also admitted that they had been wondering when I'd find someone. I felt guilty for not mentioning Peter sooner, but my mom, knowing my independent nature, reassured me that she was just happy I'd found someone I was serious about. Growing up, my parents were my role models. They met in college and have always supported each other's ambitions. My dad worked his way up in a big company while my mom pursued her love for cooking, eventually teaching classes. Their relationship was one of mutual respect and support, and it taught me the value of independence from an early age. Though I was always academically inclined, I didn't want to rely on my family forever. Even though they were well off, I wanted to create my own life and stand on my own 2 feet. I aspired to build a family like the one I grew up in and make my parents proud. Having children someday seemed like a simple goal, but for someone like me, it felt like a big, important step. Once Peter and I started living together, things began to shift. Peter was a graduate student, working part-time, but he didn't contribute much financially. I tried to raise it gently, suggesting he use more of his part-time income to help with our expenses. His response, "I'm already contributing. Didn't you say you'd take care of the bills when we moved in together, Tiffany?" His words made me uneasy. Peter had always wanted to become a professor, which is why he was in grad school, and I'd reassured him that we didn't need to worry about money since I had a stable job. Still, I ended up just agreeing with him, not knowing how else to respond. Peter sighed and said, "You wouldn't understand. Grad school is expensive, but speaking of money, I need $1,000 for a research trip. Can you lend it to me? I'll pay you back later." These kinds of requests became more frequent, and our problems began to pile up. Peter started spending more nights away from home, leaving me alone with cold dinners and unanswered texts. When he did come back, he seemed in good spirits, but I was too forgiving. Sometimes he'd suggest, "Hey, remember you wanted to go somewhere? I have tomorrow off, let's go." He'd compliment my cooking and make me feel appreciated. Each time he showed a little kindness, I'd convince myself that our marriage was fine, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. I was becoming more isolated and anxious, stuck in a pattern of temporary happiness followed by long stretches of loneliness. I didn't want to burden my parents with my marriage troubles, but I had a feeling they were starting to notice. It had been a while since I'd visited them, so when I finally did, my dad casually suggested I stay for dinner. My mom prepared a huge meal to welcome me back, and during dinner, my dad mentioned that my Aunt Lori had recently been asking about me. She had always been spontaneous, adventurous, and independent, a bit of a free spirit. "I'll reach out to her soon," I replied, grateful for the subtle reminder to connect with family. My dad reminisced about how much Aunt Lori had always cared for me, and how she joked that Peter had stolen me away. Lori had always been a confidant to me, someone I could talk to when I couldn't speak to my parents. At first, I had hesitated to discuss my issues with Peter with her, but now, I was eager to reach out. A few days later, I met Lori at a cafe. She was as stylish as ever, and after giving me a quick once-over, she gently said, "Tiffany, marriage is just the beginning of a lifelong journey. You should always feel confident and attractive, no matter what. Your clothes, your look, it all matters. So don't forget to take care of yourself." She took a sip of her tea with grace, and I realized just how much I had neglected my own well-being. I apologized for not staying in touch more, and Lori chuckled. "That's typical of you, Tiffany. You're so serious, but you tend to be too timid about the important things. I was thrilled when I heard you'd found someone special. I thought, finally, Tiffany's moving forward." Spending time with her felt refreshing. The weather was perfect, and we sat on the cafe terrace in the warm sunlight. It was a rare moment of peace, and I felt comfortable enough to share my concerns about Peter. At first, I thought that someone as reserved as me could make a relationship work with him, but lately, I wasn't so sure. Lori listened carefully, nodding as I spoke. When I finished, she asked, "I guess you haven't told your parents about all this, have you?" "No, I've barely told anyone," I admitted. I didn't want to seem weak or vulnerable. I thought I could handle it myself, to prove I was truly independent. But if my parents knew, they'd probably insist I move back home, so I've been trying to handle it alone. Lori didn't press the issue further but assured me, "If you ever need help, Tiffany, I'm here for you. I'll always be there, no matter what." A month later, my mom called me casually, saying, "When you have time, could you come by? It's nothing urgent." I had the next day off, so I decided to visit. When I pulled up to their house, I noticed a new car parked in the driveway, which immediately piqued my interest. "Dad, is this a new car? Did you just buy it? Can I take it for a spin?" I joked, excited by the idea of driving a fancy car. "Don't worry about it, it's yours, Tiffany," my mom whispered. "We thought you might need a little pick-me-up, so we got you this car. You've been through a lot lately, and we want to help. If things get tough, you can always drive this and come home." It was a luxury SUV from a well-known brand, a gesture that felt both practical and thoughtful. My dad even arranged a parking spot for it near my condo. I was overwhelmed by their kindness and felt a sense of support I hadn't realized I'd been missing. Later, as I drove downtown, I reached for the key in my pocket, pressed the button, and watched the lights flash on the SUV. It was then that I realized. I heard a familiar voice behind me. "What's with the car?" I turned to see Peter, my estranged husband, who hadn't been home for what felt like forever. It was as if we were living completely separate lives. His presence hit me like a shock, and for a brief moment, I was left speechless as he eyed the car with a smug grin. "Ah, I see, a gift from your parents, right?" Every time I faced Peter, I struggled to find the right words, but today, something was different. I was tired of feeling small. "Peter, don't you care anymore? Do you even care about me?" I forced the words out, my heart racing as I gathered every bit of courage. Peter's expression hardened, and then he dropped a bombshell. "Are you just realizing that now? Did you think I loved you all this time? It's ridiculous how hopeful you are." His mocking laughter rang in my ears, cold and sharp. Something inside me snapped, and I retorted, louder than usual, "Then why did you marry me?" His gaze turned cold. "Wow, you're going to be that cold about it?" I could barely believe what I was hearing. "So, marrying me was just a meal ticket for you, huh? And now you want the car too because it's wasted on me. That's just great." Peter didn't even flinch at my words. With chilling indifference, he added, "You know, we're getting divorced. Without me, you'll never find another man. Think about it." His words were like daggers, and he walked away without so much as a second glance. My chest tightened, and my head pounded with the intensity of my emotions. I sat in the driver's seat, trying to steady my breath, trying to process the devastation. I needed advice, and there was only one person I could turn to. I called Aunt Lori. After a few days of reflection, I agreed to the divorce. I moved back in with my parents, and although it was a relief, the peace was fleeting. One afternoon, Peter showed up at my parents' house, his parents in tow. They all filed into the living room, and Peter's father spoke first, his voice hard and stern. "We're here to talk about our son's divorce." The tension in the room was palpable as the conversation about the divorce began, but I wasn't about to let Peter's family bully me anymore. "If you don't agree to the divorce, I'll use my parents' connections at the university to ruin your career. It wouldn't be hard to destroy the future of a junior registrar if their daughter files a complaint," I warned Peter coldly. Peter's eyes flickered with uncertainty, But his father immediately retaliated. "We could easily contest the divorce," he said, his voice dripping with venom. Beneath her quiet exterior, Tiffany's manipulative and greedy. "Poor Peter. I've heard she paid him to keep his distance. She must have had other men. We should take this to family court and claim Peter was coerced by his wife. However, if she were to give up that car she's been driving, we might be willing to smooth things over." The air in the room grew thick as Peter and his parents absorbed his father's words. Just as the tension reached a breaking point, the doorbell rang, and my mom answered. Aunt Lori walked in, as calm and collected as ever. "Sorry I'm late. How's everything going?" she asked, her eyes scanning the room. Peter's family had met Lori at my wedding, and they clearly weren't thrilled to see her now. "What are you doing here? It's rude to barge in like this. We're dealing with something serious. Outsiders should leave," Peter's mother snapped. "No, don't be like that," Lori responded, unfazed. "You've heard about Peter's divorce, right? How would an outsider like you know anything about that?" Peter's father barked. Lori's smile remained steady. "My brother told me earlier. I couldn't miss such an important moment for my niece." Someone muttered, "You're probably here to stop the divorce or for money." Lori's eyes sparkled with a mix of defiance and triumph. "Can you still say that after seeing this?" she said, pulling a stack of documents from her bag and spreading them out on the table. "I hired a detective to look into this. It turns out Peter has been cheating on Tiffany with multiple women, while he was still married. He's hardly come home because of it. He took advantage of Tiffany's kindness and even asked her for money." The room fell silent, Peter's face drained of color, and the weight of Lori's revelations hung heavy in the air. "I was immersed in my research," Peter started to stammer, trying to salvage the situation. "When I did come home, we still shared meals and went on trips. We looked like a normal married couple, right?" I felt the anger rise in me again, but before I could respond, Peter's voice broke with desperation. "Tiffany, say something." His father quickly intervened, trying to smooth things over. "You don't need to defend yourself, Peter. We'll handle this. It's not your fault," he said, his voice frantic. Peter's mother, still in denial, added, "These documents are probably fabricated. Our Peter would never do such things. He's a good, kind son." Aunt Lori wasn't finished. "You might be kind to your parents, but it seems that kindness stops there. Like father, like son," she shot back, her voice laced with bitter irony. She pulled out a photograph from the stack of papers. "I was at a hotel for a business meeting recently, and guess who I saw? William, with another woman. Very cozy, so I had the detective look into him as well. The results were just as I expected. Do you understand now?" Peter's mother's face turned a sickly shade of pale. She grabbed the documents from the table, her hands trembling as she examined them. "What is this, William? How long has this been going on? It's all lies, isn't it?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "Kayla, stop looking at that. Give me those." William, panicked, tried to snatch the documents away, but it was too late. Kayla's face crumpled, and she confronted William, her voice trembling with fury. "You've been cheating on me. The car you wanted so badly was for her, wasn't it?" No matter how much William tried to apologize, Kayla was inconsolable. The conversation about Peter's divorce was forgotten as she stormed out of the house, tears streaming down her face. William followed after her, desperately trying to explain. Peter, completely lost, blurted out, "Hey, wait, what about me?" and ran after them, still confused. A stunned silence filled the room. Aunt Lori gave me a knowing look, a quiet satisfaction in her eyes. She had anticipated this, and now the truth was out. After the chaos settled, Aunt Lori shared that Peter's parents had eventually divorced as well. "You won't fall for a man like that again," Lori said with a smile. "Now, let's make you shine. I'll teach you everything you need to know about grooming yourself as a woman." She became a regular presence in my life, taking me out for meals and shopping trips, teaching me how to take better care of myself, and showing me what real confidence felt like. A year later, I made the life-changing decision to attend graduate school. I threw myself into my studies, and the transformation was nothing short of remarkable. Time passed quickly, and one day, as I stood at a busy street intersection, I heard someone call my name. I turned around. It was Peter. "It's been a while. You've changed a lot, haven't you?" he said, surprise evident in his voice. I barely recognized him. In his eyes, The woman he had once known as his plain ex-wife had turned into someone radiant, confident, and full of life. Meanwhile, Peter's life had crumbled. His parents had cut him off financially after the scandal, and he had dropped out of grad school. The carefree life he had once enjoyed was gone, replaced with the harsh reality of struggling to make ends meet. The women who had once been interested in him had moved on, leaving him with nothing but his regrets. As Peter stood before me, his eyes filled with confusion, I felt no trace of the old attachment. Just then, a man approached us. "Sorry I'm late. Are you a friend of Tiffany's?" he asked, smiling warmly. It was Kevin, the man I'd recently started dating. His presence couldn't have been more perfectly timed. While I was out with Kevin, a group of women nearby noticed him, whispering among themselves, "Wow, that guy is handsome. He's so tall. Could he be a model?" Kevin, noticing my brief exchange with Peter, nodded at him with a calm, composed smile. "He's someone from my past, but it's fine. We're done talking. Shall we go?" he said, taking my hand gently. Peter stood frozen, watching us, unable to process what was happening. Kevin and I walked away, my hand firmly in his as we headed toward the crosswalk. I kept my gaze forward, focused on the path ahead and the future waiting for me. I didn't look back.